Hi folks, welcome back. My name is Warbass. I was out of town recently, and while I had a couple of things that were recently said in the comments that were stuck in my head in the best kind of way. This is my B case, Techno drum focused, and for a while I've had this dual 100 grit setup that traditionally I was running as a left and right pair. But some folks said some things that I think actually were like very right. So Athco here, I'm not going to read this all to you, but he was talking about, or they were talking about how the kick doesn't hit very hard in the center because it's such a wide stereo image, which I kind of agreed with. And we went back and forth a little bit as we talked about how I was, missing having Axis in the case, and I was trying to rearrange this to get that back in. And his suggestion was to pull some of that dry mix before going through the 100 grits, that's kind of in the chain, back into the final mix, because I do have my kick as a completely mono signal going into things, but it was getting lost as I ran it through the dual 100 grits in the original setup in this case. The other comment, kind of similar, Aaron Macri, try mixing some of the dry signal to keep some of the punchier drums. Distorting drums is fun, but you want them transients. I kind of agree. But as I was playing around with how I might lay this out, how I might solve for still needing at least a couple of envelopes and some modulation, I originally had the idea of Zadar, bailing on maths, adding Zadar, Axis, and EAS from Instro, the little logic module in here, to fill in the final 4 HP. And then I realized that this might be what I really need. This is the LRMSMSLR from Worng Electronics. And in this current setup, which I've only had together now for a few hours, I'm just ecstatic. So instead of running the 200 grits as a left and right, I'm now running them as a mid and side, which solves for a couple of things. It solves the ability to make a really punchy kick right down the center. It solves for, having the Axis back in the case, it solves for being able to mix some of the dry signal back in with the dual stereo crossfader there. But the other thing that I was kind of missing out on in the old setup was the chaotic, playful nature of the 200 grits. The kind of brass balls at the top to really mess with things when it was just hitting one ear, because you can't really do those identically in the same way. It was a little more off-putting than I wanted it to be. So I'm just going to play some stuff through here, talk a little bit while I do, and hopefully you'll hear the same difference that I hear. So we'll just put a kick through. So right now I have this silver 100 grit cut off really low. This is our mid, this is our sides. You should be hearing this right down the center, and this one's going to be controlling what you hear kind of on the edges. And that's all thanks to the LRMSMSLR module right here. So I have super high resonance, and I have this cutoff brought down nearly to the kind of fundamental of that kick. On the other side, there's our side signal, which you can get that wonderful 100 grit kind of flavor to it, as I just fixed the autofocus on my camera there. Without it being too chaotic and only sitting in the right or only sitting in the left. This way it spreads apart really nicely. Now I've also got the Axis, so if I want to, although the gains are going to be totally different now, pull that more back into just the dry signal. And then get rid of my delay at the end. So that's just the LXR on its own. And now we're mixing in the 100 grit signal path. If you don't know at all what I'm talking about, this is the first video you've seen of mine. I'll link a couple videos up here and in the description about how this case is typically patched. Basically everything, the entire mix, comes out of Golden Master and then goes through the 100 grits and then the Nautilus. Of course, now I'm using the Axis, this buffered malt from Patching Panda, and the LRMSMSLR to really add to that. So you can almost say that like that top quarter of the case now is just about getting that end of chain for this case right. And because the 100 grits are just so capable and playable, I can almost not use the left third of this and still have plenty of crazy sounds to make, which are right up the alley for this, the goal for this case. So let's add some more stuff into here. And because I've got the cutoff on the mid 100 grit very low, none of that hi-hat is sitting in the center. Now there's a little bit of it because there's still some dry signal on the axis here. If we go all the way this way, so we're just getting the signal that went through the 100 grits, that hat should be sitting completely on the edge of the stereo field. If you don't hear the difference, put some headphones on, and that should start to be a little bit more obvious. If I pull this resonance down and change the cutoff so we're essentially identical in the 200 grit setup, it should kind of not be as obvious, you know, the stereo image. There's still going to be some difference between this and running them in a pure left and right setup, just because the amount of feedback and like strange audio paths that's happening in here and the trim of each aren't perfect. So when the LRMSMSLR does the addition and subtraction to get the different mid and side signals, split those off and put them back together, they're inherently going to still be a little bit different. So you'll still get some of that stereo effect. It's not going to be totally mono, but it becomes really obvious when we do something like that. See what I mean? That kind of like the squealy nature of the 100 grits is something that I want to be able to have and play with and dive deep into. And in the old setup, when these were left and right, it was more disorienting than it was fun, I think. It still was fun, but you could get weird, a little bit too weird, I felt. Alright, now let's bring in Polygogo. Not sure how exactly this is going to sound. It's very low. Maybe we can bring that up a little bit. So I go right back to where it was. change I've had to make, because I was originally using this buffered mult to really just mult the kick drum trigger so I could do a nice sidechain envelope through the Cockpit 1U, because now I'm using the buffer mult for the entire audio signal to get two of them, or two copies, so that I can crossfade. So let's bring a little bit of that dry signal back. Now instead I have a separate pad on the drum sequencer for the essentially equivalent kick pattern, but for triggering the sidechain envelope. So this is the kick, which you can't really hear over the top of that. There it is. And this is the sidechaining. So if they're both there, now that sidechaining's working, but I can take away the kick and keep the sidechain. Or get rid of the sidechain. I love this. Sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get with this. Alright, let's change kits. This might be a little weird because there's so many low elements. Yeah, let's do something else. That'll be good. Sometimes with the LXR, when you're kind of kit hopping like that, and I go to do a transition back to bringing that kick in, it just doesn't hit. But it's because I'm using mostly the preset kicks, or preset kits. Sorry, I made changes to a bunch of them. I don't remember really which ones I've changed, which ones I haven't at this point. All right, let's get weird. you ever just want to play the filters, sometimes you just can't stop it. That's all. I really liked the 200 grits before. It felt, and I talked about this in the past, it felt like it was kind of driving more than I was, so sometimes a little too much. And since I always use headphones, I don't even have monitors. When those weren't right, it was a little disorienting. Now I get the stereo field that I want out of 100 grit, but with the pleasant, balanced nature that I didn't have before. So super, super great little module. Cheap too. I think I got it for like $70. Can't beat that. All right. Till next time. I think I'm going to just leave this patched for like a while, and then I figure out what I want to do with CV as I go. Thanks for watching. Peace.